gentlemen. Uh, received number of calls from people who are trickling in, thanks to ABC reasons. We're very grateful that we have with us two of the foremost experts in legal engineering as far as the electricity sector is concerned, Mr. Sanjay Sen, Senior Counsel, Mr. Amit Kapoor, Jay Sagar, and of course we're very lucky to have Mr. Kawle, who has been, besides other things, the managing director of one of the largest distribution companies, which is MECDCL today. The old days was MECB, then he was Joint Secretary in the Ministry of Power, and then he took a premature retirement, and then he joined private sector, and today he represents one of the biggest, or one of the big private sector players, Ratan. What we really want to do is, this is a curtain raiser, this is not a full-fledged conference. This is basically share thoughts, brief comments from each of the panelists on what is and what is not possible. The agenda is basically looking at what is the role of distribution companies in the context of separation of content and carriage, and its impact on the incumbent players. So if you're going to have, on the one hand, the argument that you are having to sign, and I would love to be corrected here, you can't get a coal allocation unless you have a long-term PPA, or if you have one, to maintain your coal allocation, you need to have a long-term PPA. And if that is the case, then who do you have long-term PPA with? And the answer to that question apparently is, obviously would have been a distribution company. But with the distribution company itself being broken up into content and carriage, then perhaps it is a little bit of a challenge as to who you're going to sign up the long-term contract with. So the status of and the role of distribution companies in the context of separation of content and carriage. Do we have an exact copy of the Electricity Act which is in Parliament? Everybody has a copy? Yeah, we do. Okay, great. No, it's fine. I just want to make sure everybody has a copy, so that we are on the same track. We're not looking at some two different things. So let's have initial reactions on the first topic: status of distribution companies, separation of content and carriage, and its impacts on incumbent players. Let me start off with Amit. Amit, your points. Your thoughts.
Basic problem of the sector is not addressed. The problem of transitioning from the bundled distribution and retail supply to segregation of content and carriage in the bill does have no indications of how you're going to handle the 3.5 lakh crores of regulatory asset which hangs around the neck of distribution sector in the economy. Nobody knows where it will be parked, nobody knows how it's going to be funded, nobody knows how it's going to be financed, and nobody knows how it's going to be retired. There is also no horizon on retirement because we know that the tariff policy said 3 years. We are now 11 years into it, and it's been created and ballooned from 42,500 crores Monte Singh Mela to 3.5 lakh crores today. So I don't see that getting resolved. If you don't resolve that, the big issue comes in is how do you now move forward in segregation, particularly where you're saying that the default supplier can be notified by the regulator from time to time. So suddenly a new person who comes in as a second licensee or a licensee in an area, as a supply licensee, gets saddled with the responsibility with no knowledge of what is coming to his balance sheet and what's getting retired. Because I can't imagine 3.5 lakh crores vanishing somewhere with a magic wand. So any reform which doesn't address that problem and doesn't address 5.5 to 6 lakh crores of stranded loans in various investments is a non-starter so for that concern. All stories of 24/7 renewable energy, etc., is not going to get us anywhere till you resolve this issue. And the bill does nothing to deal with it. First problem.
You said 3.5 crore dues obviously.
3.5 lakh is regulatory.
Regulated. Regulated. And 5 lakhs.
5.5 to 6 lakh crores is the bank money invested in various power projects, transmission, generation, distribution, and retail supply.
Is it 5 to 6 lakhs crores?
6, around 5.5 plus. and growing up by every day. So I don't know where the number is today.
How the power sector use?
These numbers are available on any website or any authentication? Yeah.
This is of course the legacy issue, 3.5 crores. What happens in future? Because there is no real answer to the issue of cross subsidy. The original Act 2003, it says progressive elimination of cross subsidy. Then it became progressive reduction of cross subsidy. That reduction never happened. And unless political will is shown, that reduction will not happen. Now, in the new scenario, how does the cross subsidy issue get dealt with? It will get parked in some residual supply company for rural areas. That is not very clear. If that happens, then that company will go very soon bankrupt. So at least today, whatever imperfect mechanism of cross subsidy which is there, is propping that up. When that propping up does not happen any longer, and if the government, state government is not in a position to do so, then that 24/7 is a pipe dream. In fact, it will be further away than where it is today. Once the cherry picking happens, what happens to the legacy PPAs that the distribution companies have entered into is a worry that is now plaguing the companies. Particularly the...
Yeah, it's fine, sir, continue.
Particularly to the higher cost PPAs, how will they get allocated? Now, everybody will have to go back to the drawing board. Various companies may get carved out, as in, in the wake of 2003 Act, people tried to do various mixing and matching of distribution company jurisdictions. So the same thing will happen. Then the issue of allocation of various PPAs will happen. So you will try to, or the state government will try to allocate the higher cost PPAs to richer areas like urban areas, industrial areas, etc. The lower cost PPAs will get allocated to the rural areas. Whether that will bridge the gap, that again is not known. So with all these questions unanswered, I don't know whether the objective of the original objective will get fulfilled. If in 10 years or 12 years we have not been really able to get open access, which was supposed to be the cornerstone of 2003 Act. Now suddenly we have given up on that and we have gone one step further, separation of carriage and content. The reasons why that open access failed have not been addressed, and we have come to the next solution, next generation solution. I think it is not workable. No.
The segregation of carriage and content may not be required because in the present Act, the common carrier concept is already in existence. It's a part of the Act that a distribution licensee would have an obligation to carry electrons in its capacity as a common carrier. So I don't see why they're doing this. Now, like it was said, regulatory asset. In Delhi, it's about 20,000 crores. UP, it is 46,000 crores. So this is post one set of reform where you took away these losses and had parked it in a holding company. And those continue to be parked in some holding company. Now you have a separate set of losses which are yet to be parked somewhere. So when you take away the underlying asset and the wire company is formed, then what is the basis of any further funding? Because the underlying asset is taken away. So how do you make it bankable?
What's bankable?
The supply business. The regulatory asset has to be in somebody's balance sheet. Now let us, for example, look at a balance sheet of a Delhi DISCOM. The regulatory asset has to go somewhere. Where do you take it? I don't know. Unless Amit has an answer. Mr. Gowda has some kind of a view on this. Fundamental to electricity is metering. The entire agricultural load is on an unmetered basis. So till we don't solve basic issues, look at the ARR of any distribution licensee in Punjab. or any large state, it is still done on a horsepower basis on some kind of a sample study. So you are not even captured the quantum of electron that you are trying to sell. So whether it's a supply licensee or any other author, fundamentally you have to have the political will to meter. So where are we talking about all these sophisticated reforms when we are still missing on basic fundamentals? So, and in the Act as it was 2003, there was a 2-year window within which 100% metering had to be achieved. Punjab continues to be predominantly unmetered. There's a Terry report on this. So I don't know. They are also looking at in some form of a new renewable bill or act. Some amendments in this which are covering the renewable sector. Possibly a lot of the suggestions in this amendment has come from the stand which the energy exchanges have been taking from time to time. This interpretation of section 49, that 1 megawatt and above should not get the regulatory tariff, was something that was being done earlier through planning commission route, in other words. So, I don't know, this is, I think we subscribe to the view of everybody else in the panel that I think there is a lack of clear thinking on actual working of the 2003 Act and the problems that we have seen and the assessment of those problems, the economic assessment of those problems and a solution which will address the economic solution. That's kind of it.
The second issue, mandatory. There on the screen, sir.
Yeah, my reaction is, so far as the regulatory setup is concerned, they have given extremely valuable credence, or they have followed the policies. They have, in fact, even when it comes to the competitive bidding, which came through the policy, the cutoff date, I think everybody fell in line. So whether you make it mandatory or not, I think because it was a statutory policy, and both for purposes of tariff fixation under 61, there is a reference to being guided by these policies. Regulators and utilities across the country, they were fairly guided by these policies, except when it came to determination of the cross-subsidy and cross-subsidy surcharge. That is where utilities and regulators said we will not go by the marginal cost to serve, we will go by the average cost. And they differed from the formula given the tariff policy, because the whole object at that point of time was to increase the transaction cost to deny open access. So again, it's a will issue. It's more of a, so that, except that I don't see any large-scale departure from the policy document, except when it came to the calculation of cross-subsidy surcharge. Several regulators took a view that we will not follow the avoidance cost or the marginal cost method, we will follow the average cost method. So it took some persuasion from the appellate tribunal to set that right. And
86K, 86J.
yeah, recidivary clause, yeah.
The clause talks, is there in the documentation. 86J says that you can fix a trading margin. In the case of CRC, it is if necessary. In the case of states, you have to fix a trading margin.
No, but these are all, it really doesn't affect the sector so much. If you fix a trading margin or the ability to fix a trading margin was always there.
No,
but because the state utilities were trading themselves.
How will that impact the state utilities which are going to be trading?
No, now actually the bilateral trades have come down. So most of the trades are happening in the short term through the exchange. In the short term. The long term, any case, the margins will apply in that sense. So,
now talking about the distribution companies themselves who are
yeah, but they're selling in the short term, they're selling in the exchange, or they're buying in the exchange. And let's take an example, hard example, Gridco. This whole trading margin that Gridco is not liable under the margin conditions of CERC. They said the states were not bound by the CERC because the delivery point was within the state.
Yeah.
So Gridco was selling power to PTC within the state. PTC was taking it outside the state, so PTC became liable for the trading margin, Gridco was not.
Yeah.
Correct. So they want to maybe, address that, which is okay. If, I don't see that much. It doesn't have a consequence in the sector as such. And if you look at the trading volumes of these companies, it's come down significantly. Again, that raises a larger question. You have a single buyer model in Gujarat and Odisha. With the supply business, supply license, now what happens to that model? That's a different issue.
I understand that the tariff policy is sought to be made mandatory. It's not advisory in nature. I don't think this is in keeping with the present spirit of increased federalism, where the Prime Minister is on record having said that one size fits all is not the policy that we would like to follow. I think this is against that, because regulators then will not be able to devise solutions which are specifically suited to that particular state. Not a welcome provision in my opinion. Because if in a state they come to the conclusion that Section 62 is a better way to go, looking at the market, and through the market mechanism, you are not likely to get rates which are competitive. There are issues. The option of Section 62 should remain available to the regulator, depending on the requirements of that state. Otherwise, broadly, it's in my opinion, a legal issue whether you can say that policy will override provisions of the Act. I don't know whether that position can be acceptable to the legal fraternity. But the immediate consequence is this, that the federalism principle goes away.
I think the larger questions, and I would differ with Sanjay on the fact that the issue of the whole structure, the way it exists on mandatory provisions, is not just retrograde but beyond, and particularly on trading margin. I'll come back to it. First, as Jayan said, absolutely right. Through the back door, you're trying to enforce a policy as binding on statute, contrary to basic principles of law. Because the policy is made by a delegate of the statute, and you're trying to override 62 by 63. As interpreted today, and as the language stands before the amendment goes through, 62 is the rule. 63 is an exception. Essential Commodities Act, and we see electricity as an essential commodity. It's a scarce commodity. And Regulatory Economics 101 tells you that you don't compete for shortages. When you compete for shortages, you exacerbate the market, the prices go up, and there is more distress. This is an input cost to the economy. I don't know what we are trying to do. Are we trying to defeat Make in India? Because if you are making sure that every iota, every electron which is produced in the country is going to be procured through competitive bidding, what do you do with the 85% PPAs which have been signed up? Do you have the courage to go and tell NTPC, sorry, long-term PPAs are gone, you will compete in the market? I don't think that mechanism exists. Number two, you have destroyed traders totally. Trader, as defined in the Act, is somebody who buys to resell, which means you carry the credit risk. For a 4 paisa or a 7 paisa margin, you are supposed to take the market risk of 4 rupees, 5 rupees, 7 rupees electricity, which means for 1 unit of electricity that you successfully trade, and you get into trouble because of some reason, 100 units of trade go out. So there is no viable option. By definition, you are supposed to purchase to resell. You've been reduced to a commission agent, and therefore you frustrated the whole scheme of the Act. So I don't think this is as simple as that. The third big issue is that at the end of the day, what are you trying to do other than to address some cases which unfortunately went against the union? There are judgments like the Metro Railway, like the Railways Matters, where you're trying to give licenses through the back door. So there is an overall erosion of the regulatory autonomy, which was the bulwark of Electricity Act 2003. Now, unless the stated policy of the government is, we don't believe regulatory autonomy is necessary, we want to claw back by the fiat of the executive to take over that part. Now you have the second distribution license being given by the government at the instance of the government. You have several other provisions where the regulatory autonomy is being compromised. So are we saying that we are looking at a different regulatory architecture? Then have the courage to stand up and say so. Don't bring it through the back door by making tariff policy enforceable against the statute. Because 62 will come in the way. Like it or not, our fraternity will be very happy. We'll run into courts and matters. It will not serve the end of the economy or the industry. So I don't know what we're trying to do.
Sanjay's happiness is already obvious.
Yes, that's why he did not touch the point. The third issue on that, and I think rather than break it into the 8 topics, I think they're interrelated. At the end of the day, 11 years down the line, 12th year into it, there are some serious credible questions on the regulatory institution that have come. And one of those was, now the reason for the tariff policy perhaps to be enforced more strictly is an issue of implementation. Where Section 11 was not found suitable, it was exploited for other purposes by states which didn't want to allow IPPs to sell outside. And you wanted to have them hostage by giving a fiat and a direction beyond the statute, which is still in Supreme Court. You will sell to X as price Y, which is not the scope of the Act. That's not being addressed. Regulatory institutions have been called in question, criticized by the Supreme Court time and again because you have no judicial member on adjudication. There are judgments of the Supreme Court that have categorically gone to the point of literally issuing a mandamus. Short of that, they have advised the government. All adjudication must be headed. There are 2 constitution bench judgments of 2012 and 14, which warrant that all adjudicatory functions must be performed by a judicial member chairing. You don't have that. That's not being dealt with. So therefore, it's bound to be called in question faster than you think. The third issue that comes in is it is still a sinecure of some retired people. You are not looking at the institution playing the role that it must. The respect that was given to the institution because the court said this is a multidisciplinary expert body is gone. You have a single member, you often have 3 people from the same line of service who have done various other things which are very important, like Rickshaw Puller Welfare Association and Child and Welfare, Women Welfare and some other things, food distribution, but they have nothing to do with electricity. They have no idea about law. You put them in and then you keep struggling with the issue. So let's try and look at the construct 11 years down the line into the 12th with the problem that we have created for ourselves and resolve them. Unless you address them, they are just playing at the fringes. I think this requires a total reread as a structure. There are 5 stated objectives if you look at the bill. And those 5, if you look at the bill, you will find it at the last page, are very clearly set out. And I'll just read it out so that the rest of the discussion can focus. We have 2 other eminent members of the profession here now, Mr. Vaidyanathan, Senior Counsel, and Mahesh. And I think they should step in and give their views. The objectives are, para 2 and 3 of the objectives and reasons. 1, bring further competition and efficiency in distribution by giving choice to consumer, segregating carriage from content, introducing multiple supply licenses based on market principles and continuing carriage as a regulated activity. Fundamental flaws, we've already given you some. The bigger issue that will come in terms of segregation and carriage of content, because you have a single buyer model not only in Orissa and Gujarat. By introducing the intermediary company, you are ensuring that will be the national model. So you will have one person who will control and therefore allocate the PPAs. By allocating PPAs, I will make sure that I balance out the price distinction between various companies. There will be no benchmarking. And you will fix the tariff on the highest because they are state utilities. You want the subsidy coming into the play. Second, promote renewable energy, which unless funded and viable, where is the feed-in tariff coming from? Taxpayer. Third, maintain grid security. When you have overlaps between the load dispatch centers and the RLDC and with STU and the PGCI, there is no way that you will have governance of the nature that you warrant for grid security. CEA's role is being played around with again, which is not giving much comfort beyond a point except for one clarification. Now the techno-economic clearance has been brought back into the statute. I wonder why a generator needs to give his technical and economic data to see
licensed.
Then let's try and say that. Let's have the courage of saying that we want to realize. Let's say we are not going to the market. While we say market, we don't mean market. Fourth, rationalized tariff determination, they say. Recovery of revenue from licensees without revenue gap. Nobody knows who's funding it. Timely filing of tariff petitions. This was a flaw where the regulators were, which the tariff policy issue has been addressed in the tribunal. The third is empowering the commissions to initiate suo motu proceeding, which is fine, and requiring timely decision making, good idea. But when you do this, you have to look at the regulatory construct of the institution and build strength in that. And unless you are addressing that at the micro level, you are playing in the fringes. The fourth issue, which is equally important, is your standard transmission capacities. You are basically, we have 260,000 megawatts installed capacity, 58,000 today. we are generating less than 160,000 megawatts annually, which is around 65%. If you look at the data which is on the Ministry of Power website, it's shocking to know that between 2010 and 2015, the target PLF has been reduced on a national average from 77.2% to 64.7%. So that's the benefit of reform. For private sector, has gone down from 83.9 to 63 by over 24%. If your PLF objectives are going down,